The crystal towers of Zentari Prime reached toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest spire, 12 alien species sat around a circular table made of living stone. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and for 300 years they had ruled the known galaxy with wisdom and strength. Today they faced their biggest problem, yet Ambassador Vector coiled his snake-like body around the speaking platform. His scales shimmered green and gold under the artificial suns that lit the chamber. The other council members watched as he prepared to deliver the most important message in their history. The Altarian Empire had volunteered to speak for all of them because humans seemed to respond better to reptilian species than to the insect-like Korth or the crystal beings of the Dominion. Across the galaxy, Admiral Jake Martinez stood on the command deck of Earth Defense Station Luna. The massive orbital platform circled Earth's moon like a steel guardian. Through the thick windows he could see the blue marble of his homeworld turning slowly in the darkness. He had been expecting this call for weeks, but that did not make it any easier to receive. The holographic projector hummed to life, and suddenly Vector's image filled the center of the command room. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority as he began to speak. Humanity had become a problem that could no longer be ignored. They expanded too fast and fought too hard. They asked too many questions and refused to follow the established order. The council had decided that something must be done. The ultimatum was simple and brutal. Humans had 30 standard days to surrender all military vessels to council forces. They must abandon every colony beyond the Sol system and return to their homeworld. All human technology development would be supervised by council experts. Any attempt to resist would result in the complete destruction of human civilization. Captain Lisa Brown received the same message while her ship drifted at the edge of the Kepler system. The New Horizon was an exploration vessel designed to seek out new worlds for human settlement. Her crew of 43 men and women had been preparing to survey the fourth planet when the transmission arrived. Now they sat in stunned silence as the reality of their situation became clear. On Earth, President Helen Davis called an emergency meeting in the White House Situation Room. The oak table that had witnessed countless decisions throughout American history now hosted the most important discussion in human existence. General Pete Williams slammed his fist down hard enough to make the coffee cups jump. His weathered face showed the anger that every human felt when faced with the council's demands. The intelligence report spread across the table painted a grim picture. The council commanded fleets of ships that could cross the galaxy in days using technology humans barely understood. Their weapons could crack planets, and their shields could stop any attack humanity might attempt. According to every military analysis, the war would be over before it began. But the Council had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They had studied human technology and found it primitive. They had observed human tactics and found them chaotic. They had watched human expansion and found it reckless. What they had failed to understand was the human spirit that drove all of these things. Dr. Susan Clark worked deep beneath the surface of Titan in laboratories that officially did not exist. For 20 years, she had been studying pieces of alien technology recovered from crashed ships and diplomatic exchanges. The Council believed that humans were too primitive to understand their advanced systems. They were wrong. Captain Roy Fisher commanded a supply ship that carried more than food and medicine to the outer colonies. Hidden in his cargo holds were weapons and equipment that the Council would never suspect humans possessed. More importantly, he carried information that could change the course of the coming war. The Council's overconfidence showed in every word of their ultimatum. They expected humans to surrender like every other species had done when faced with superior force. They believed that a show of overwhelming power would make resistance impossible. They thought humans would choose survival over freedom. As the 30-day deadline began to count down, every human colony received the same message from Earth. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of human history. Remember the Alamo, where a few hundred men held off an army? Remember Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans faced impossible odds? Remember that humans had never surrendered when their freedom was at stake. The Council waited for humanity's answer, confident that it would come in the form of a white flag. They had crushed dozens of rebellions before, and this would be no different. After all, what could one primitive species do against the combined might of 12 advanced civilizations? They were about to find out that humans had a very different definition of impossible than the rest of the galaxy. The countdown to war had begun, and humanity was ready to show the Council exactly what they were made of. 27 days remained when Commander Alex Turner entered the secret codes that activated Protocol 7. Deep beneath the frozen surface of Titan, the most classified facility in human space came alive with urgent activity. Red lights flashed through corridors that had been waiting decades for this moment. The Titan research facility had been built for one purpose, and that day had finally arrived. Dr. Susan Clark stood before a massive machine that hummed with barely contained energy. Project Midnight Sun had consumed 15 years of her life and the lives of hundreds of other scientists. The weapon system before her looked nothing like the sleek energy cannons the Council used. Instead, it resembled a hybrid creature born from human ingenuity and alien technology stolen. Piece by piece over decades of careful intelligence work, the Council believed humans were too primitive to understand their advanced systems. They were wrong, but not in the way they expected. Humans had not copied alien technology because copying required understanding principles that took centuries to develop. Instead, they had done something far more dangerous. They had found ways to make alien technology work for them without fully understanding how or why. Captain Roy Fisher guided his ship Spirit of Liberty through the asteroid belt toward the outer colonies. His cargo manifest listed medical supplies and farming equipment, but hidden beneath false floors lay weapons that would have shocked the Council's military analysts. Each gun and missile had been modified with components salvaged from alien wrecks. The results were unpredictable and often dangerous, but they worked in ways that alien defensive systems were not designed to handle. The real treasure in Fisher's cargo hold was not weapons, but information. For over 50 years, human spies had worked their way into Council bureaucracy. They served as translators and clerks and maintenance workers. They were invisible to species that viewed humans as primitive and harmless. Now those decades of patient intelligence gathering were about to pay the ultimate dividend. Ambassador Victor arrived on Earth expecting to oversee humanity's surrender. Instead, he found President Davis sitting calmly in the Oval Office drinking coffee from a simple ceramic mug. When he demanded to know why preparations for surrender had not begun, she asked if the Council's ultimatum was really all they had to offer. The question confused his translator, which had no programming for human sarcasm. The Council's overconfidence showed in every aspect of their preparation. They had positioned their fleets for a quick, overwhelming strike that would break human resistance before it could organize. Their battle plans assumed that humans would fight using conventional tactics learned from other species. They expected formations and honor codes and predictable responses to superior firepower. General Williams reviewed those same battle plans in a secure bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Human intelligence networks had provided detailed information about Council fleet movements and tactical doctrine. What the enemy saw as overwhelming superiority, Williams recognized as dangerous rigidity. The Council had grown comfortable with their advantages and comfort-bred carelessness. 3 days before the deadline, every human colony received the same message broadcast on all frequencies. The words carried the weight of human history and the promise of human defiance. Remember the Alamo, where outnumbered defenders chose death over surrender. Remember Thermopylae, where impossible odds became legendary victory. Remember that freedom was worth any price, and humans had never forgotten how to pay it. Dr. Clark ran final tests on weapon systems that should not have been possible. Human scientists had learned to channel exotic matter through conventional shells, creating explosions that existed partially outside normal space and time. The energy signatures looked like primitive kinetic weapons to Council sensors, but the damage they caused would be unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Captain Brown prepared her ship for operations that exploration vessels were never designed to perform. The New Horizon had been secretly refitted with ghost drives that masked its energy signature and weapons pods disguised as scientific equipment. She would not be running from the coming war, but striking. Where the enemy least expected attack, the Council's intelligence reports painted humans as chaotic and undisciplined fighters who relied more on emotion than strategy. Those reports were accurate as far as they went, but they missed the crucial point. Human chaos was not weakness, but adaptability. Human emotion was not liability, but strength. When pushed to the edge, humans did not break, but found ways to push back. Fisher reached the outer colonies and began distributing his hidden cargo to men and women who had been waiting their entire lives for this moment. Colonial militias activated in civilian facilities revealed their military functions. Every human settlement had been designed with defense in mind because humans never forgot that peace was temporary, but war was eternal. The countdown to conflict continued as both sides prepared for what they believed would be a brief and decisive campaign. The Council expected to crush primitive resistance with overwhelming technological superiority. Humanity prepared to show them that technology meant nothing without the will to use it and the wisdom to adapt when original plans failed. As the final hours approached, Ambassador Victor reported back to the Council that humans showed no signs of preparing for surrender. Instead, they seemed almost eager for the coming conflict. The Council dismissed this as primitive bravado that would collapse at the first sign of real opposition. They had no idea that humans had been preparing for this war since the day they first met aliens in deep space. Every human knew that eventually someone would try to put limits on their expansion and growth. The Council had simply volunteered to be first to learn why that was always a mistake. The deadline passed at exactly 0-hour Galactic Standard Time. War Commodore Zethran of the Hegemony led 300 Council ships toward the Sol system, expecting to find human vessels fleeing toward deep space or hiding behind their pathetic planetary defenses. Instead, his sensors detected a small fleet arrayed in battle formation near Saturn's rings, with Admiral Jake Martinez broadcasting calm defiance from the flagship Constitution. The human fleet looked pitifully small compared to the Council armada. 37 ships against 300 seemed like a mathematical certainty rather than a battle. Zethran's tactical computers calculated the engagement would last less than 10 minutes with 0 Council casualties. The War Commodore had fought rebellions before, and primitive species always collapsed when faced with overwhelming force. Martinez received the demand for immediate surrender. With the same calm he had shown throughout the crisis, his response became legendary across human space and sent shockwaves through the Council fleet. "You want our surrender," he said. "Come and take it." The words carried echoes of ancient battles and promised that humans would not go quietly into extinction. The first exchange of fire revealed the Council's crucial miscalculation. Human ships did not form neat battle lines or follow predictable engagement patterns. Instead, they scattered like wolves breaking from cover, using Saturn's rings as concealment and launching coordinated strikes that seemed to defy every principle of tactical doctrine. The Constitution vanished into the debris field, trailing false sensor signatures that confused Council targeting systems. When it emerged behind the Hegemony flagship, its weapons opened fire with energies that should not have been possible. The exotic matter shells punched through energy shields that had never failed before and continued to burn through the ship's hull like acid through paper. Captain Lisa Brown brought the New Horizon out of hyperspace behind the Council rearguard, where no human ship should have been able to travel. Her experimental ghost drives had masked the ship's approach, and now she struck at supply vessels and command ships that thought themselves safely distant from combat. The exploration vessel fought like a predator, hitting hard and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Zethran watched his tactical display with growing horror as human ships refused to die properly. When the Council destroyer Infinite Majesty took critical damage from human weapons, the exotic matter continued eating through its structure. Standard nanobotic repair systems could not stop the decay because the damage existed partially outside normal spacetime, where their programming had no effect. The Battle of Saturn's rings lasted 6 hours instead of 10 minutes when it ended. Both fleets withdrew to lick their wounds, but the psychological impact fell entirely on the Council side. They had expected to crush primitive humans in a brief demonstration of superior technology. Instead, they found themselves fighting a brutal engagement that cost 40 ships and left their tactical doctrine in smoking ruins. The weapons humans used defied everything the Council knew about military technology. Kinetic projectiles should not have been able to penetrate their energy shields. Simple chemical explosives should not have continued burning through hardened armor plating. Most disturbing of all human ships seemed to appear and disappear at will despite Council sensors that could track a grain of sand across star systems. Captain Brown's ship demonstrated the true scope of human preparation when it engaged 3 Council cruisers simultaneously. The New Horizon should have been destroyed instantly, but instead it danced between enemy fire while its hybrid weapon systems tore holes in ships designed to withstand antimatter bombardment. When the cruisers finally drove it off the exploration, vessel simply vanished as if it had never existed, War Commodore Zethrin found himself in the unprecedented position of requesting reinforcements after what should have been a routine police action. His reports to the Council described weapons that used exotic matter in ways their scientists claimed were impossible. Human ships that could mask their signatures so completely that they became invisible to all known detection methods. Tactics that abandoned every principle of civilized warfare in favor of pure aggressive opportunism. The Council's response was predictable outrage mixed with disbelief. Primitive humans could not possibly possess technology superior to their own. The War Commodore must have made tactical errors that allowed inferior forces to achieve temporary success. Additional fleets were dispatched with orders to crush human resistance quickly and decisively, but the real shock came when Council intelligence analyzed wreckage from the battle. Human weapons were indeed primitive kinetic systems, but they had been modified with exotic matter that channeled energy in ways Council science had never imagined. The hybrid technology worked despite violating established principles, because humans had never learned those principles in the first place. Admiral Martinez used the brief respite to redistribute his forces and prepare for the next engagement. Human casualties had been light because their ships were designed for survival rather than honor. When Council vessels closed for the traditional exchange of broadsides, human commanders simply refused to cooperate and fought like pirates instead of proper naval officers. The propaganda war began immediately as recordings of the battle spread throughout Council space. For species accustomed to clean, impersonal warfare fought between professional militaries, watching humans turn combat into a knife fight was deeply disturbing. Several Council member worlds began questioning whether the war was worth the cost of victory. Captain Fisher arrived at the outer colonies with news of the battle and instructions for the next phase of human resistance. Colonial militias received weapons and training for the guerrilla warfare that would follow when Council forces moved beyond the Sol system. Every human settlement prepared to become a fortress and every civilian prepared to become a soldier. The Council had expected to fight a brief police action against primitive rebels. Instead, they found themselves committed to a real war against an enemy that refused to follow the rules. Humans had answered their ultimatum with violence and defiance, and showed no sign of backing down despite facing impossible odds. The first battle was over, but the war had just begun. Both sides prepared for a longer conflict than anyone had expected, while the galaxy watched to see if the Council's 3 centuries of dominance would survive contact with human stubbornness. War Commodore Zethrin returned to Centauri Prime to find the Council chambers in chaos. For the first time in their 3-century history, they faced an enemy that refused to follow civilized rules of warfare. The crystal beings of the Dominion flickered with agitation while the insect-like Korth clicked their mandibles in distress. Nobody had expected primitive humans to fight like wild animals instead of proper military forces. The intelligence reports spread across the Council table painted a disturbing picture of human tactics. They did not limit themselves to designated battle zones or respect the non-combatant status of support vessels. Worse still, they seemed to prefer close-quarters combat over the clean, long-range engagements that civilized species favored. War had rules that everyone understood, but humans apparently had never learned them. Captain Roy Fisher demonstrated this reality when his ship intercepted a Council supply convoy near the Vega system. Instead of engaging in honorable ship-to-ship combat, Fisher's crew launched primitive boarding pods that attached to alien hulls like parasites. The idea of hand-to-hand fighting aboard starships was considered barbaric by Council standards, but humans excelled at improvised violence in confined spaces. The boarding action aboard the supply ship Eternal Prosperity became a case study in human savagery. Council crew members were trained for technical duties and emergency procedures, but not for combat against beings that seemed to enjoy violence. Human Marines moved through the ship's corridors like predators hunting prey and captured the vessel intact along with its cargo of rare metals and advanced components. Admiral Corthvan of the Crystalline Dominion commanded the Second Fleet that was dispatched to restore Council authority. His strategy was simple and brutal. Since humans refused to fight properly, he would bypass their military forces entirely and strike at civilian targets. The attack on New Geneva colony was designed to demonstrate that human resistance would only bring suffering to their own people. The Second Fleet arrived at New Geneva expecting to find terrified colonists begging for mercy. Instead, they discovered what appeared to be a completely defenseless settlement with no orbital platforms or military installations visible. Corthvan's tactical officers reported that the colony seemed to have been abandoned in haste, with only automated systems maintaining basic life support. Too late, they realized the trap that Dr. Susan Clark had spent years preparing. New Geneva was not an abandoned colony, but a massive weapons platform disguised as a civilian settlement. When the Council ships moved into bombardment range, the planet's entire surface erupted with defensive systems that had been hidden beneath false structures and camouflaged installations. The Battle of New Geneva became a slaughter as human defensive networks turned the colony into a killing field. Council ships found themselves caught in crossfire from weapons that emerged from hills and valleys and even the ocean floor. The planetary defense grid used the same exotic matter technology that had proven so effective at Saturn, but on a scale that dwarfed anything seen before. Admiral Corthvan watched in horror as his flagship took damage from artillery that fired shells existing partially outside normal spacetime. His energy shields provided no protection against weapons that bypassed conventional physics, and his return fire seemed to have no effect on gun positions that winked out of existence between shots. The Second Fleet retreated in disorder after losing 60 ships to what should have been helpless civilians. The psychological warfare aspect became clear when recordings of the battle were broadcast across Council space. For species accustomed to clean, impersonal conflict, watching humans turn their own homes into weapons was deeply disturbing. The images showed colonists, including women and children, operating defensive systems with the same casual efficiency they might use for farming or manufacturing. Several Council member worlds began questioning whether the war was worth the cost after seeing what humans were willing to do to defend themselves. The Vegan Republic withdrew 2 of its fleets from frontline duty while the Centauri Collective demanded an immediate peace conference. For the first time in Council history, member species were refusing direct orders from the Central Authority. Captain Lisa Brown led a series of hit-and-run attacks that further demonstrated human unconventional warfare. Her ship, the New Horizons, struck at Council installations throughout the outer systems using tactics that violated every principle of space combat. She would emerge from hyperspace inside asteroid fields or planetary rings where no ship should have been able to navigate safely. The exploration vessel carried weapons that seemed impossible according to Council science. Her exotic matter torpedoes could phase through solid matter and detonate inside enemy ships. Her ghost drives allowed the New Horizon to become completely invisible to all known sensors. Most disturbing of all, her crew seemed to actively enjoy the violence they inflicted on their technologically superior enemies. General Pete Williams coordinated the defense of human space from his command bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain. His strategy abandoned traditional concepts of front lines and rear areas in favor of turning every human world into a potential battlefield. Council forces found themselves fighting enemies who appeared from nowhere and vanished. Like smoke when pursued, the intelligence networks that Captain Fisher had established throughout Council space began providing detailed information about enemy fleet movements and supply routes. Human spies who had worked as servants and clerks for decades suddenly revealed their true purpose as they sabotaged installations and gathered crucial intelligence about Council capabilities and weaknesses. War Commodore Zethran requested permission to use planet-killer weapons against human worlds, but the Council hesitated. Such extreme measures had never been necessary against previous rebellions, and their use would send shock waves throughout galactic civilization. The reputation for overwhelming force that maintained Council authority depended on rarely having to demonstrate its full extent. The war reached a stalemate as human forces proved impossible to pin down and destroy, while Council fleets struggled to adapt to enemies that refused to fight fair. Every engagement taught the aliens more about human capabilities, but also revealed the depth of preparation that had gone into resistance planning. Humans had been ready for this war long before the Council declared it. Captain Brown's final message to Admiral Corthvan before vanishing into deep space became another legend of human defiance. She thanked him for providing such excellent target practice and suggested that next time the Council should bring more ships. The casual arrogance of the statement from a single human captain to a fleet admiral encapsulated everything the Council found terrifying about their new enemies. The war reached its most dangerous point when the Council made their gravest mistake yet. High Chancellor Vorthak of the Central Authority convinced the remaining member worlds that humans were simply another aggressive species that could be contained through superior firepower. The authorization for planet-killer weapons came after months of debate, but the target was carefully chosen to send a message without crossing certain lines. Luna had always been more than Earth's moon to humanity. It was their first step into space and the foundation of their expansion throughout the solar system. The Council believed that destroying the moon would demonstrate absolute superiority while avoiding the political complications of directly attacking Earth's civilian population. They were wrong about everything. The planet-killer ship Absolute Dominion emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's gravity while broadcasting demands for immediate human surrender. Admiral Jake Martinez received the ultimatum from his command post on Luna itself, where he had been coordinating resistance operations. His response was to activate defensive systems that had been generations in the making. General Pete Williams descended deeper into the lunar bunkers that had been carved from solid rock over decades of secret construction. The Council's intelligence had detected some military installations on Luna, but they had no idea of the true scope of human preparation. The moon's entire core had been hollowed out and filled with weapon systems that drew power from exotic matter reactors buried beneath the surface. Dr. Susan Clark watched from the primary control center as the Council's planet-killer weapon charged its main battery. The massive ship hung in space like a metallic predator while energy readings climbed toward levels that could crack worlds. Her finger hovered over the activation switch for Luna's ultimate defense, knowing that what happened next would change the war forever. The Council's planet-killer beam lanced out across space, carrying enough concentrated energy to shatter continents. It struck Luna's surface and did exactly nothing. The beam simply vanished as if it had never existed, while the moon continued its eternal dance around Earth unchanged and undamaged. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any explosion. What the Council did not know was that Luna's crust had been secretly reinforced with exotic matter matrices that did not just absorb energy but redirected it back along the beam's original path. The feedback surge traveled faster than light back to its source and struck the Absolute Dominion with its own amplified power. The planet-killer weapon became its own victim as the massive ship tore itself apart from the inside. Ambassador Victor watched the destruction from his observation post aboard the Council command ship and finally began to understand what they were truly facing. Humans did not just fight wars, they prepared for them constantly. Every human installation had military applications. Every civilian facility could become a fortress. Every human citizen was a potential combatant because their culture had never forgotten that freedom required eternal vigilance. The revelation that terrified the Council most came from analysis of Luna's defensive systems. Dr. Clarke's masterpiece was not just a planetary fortress but a distribution center for human military technology. If Earth fell, automated systems would scatter complete technical specifications for all human weapons across the galaxy, ensuring that any species capable of reading the data would have access to tools that could challenge Council supremacy. Captain Lisa Brown emerged from hyperspace near the Council's main supply depot at Rigel with news that changed everything. Her exploration missions had discovered something the Council never suspected. Human expansion had not stopped at the colonies they knew about. While the Council fought a defensive war trying to contain known human settlements, humans had been spreading through regions of space that alien maps marked as empty. The ghost colonies were hidden throughout the galaxy using the same technology that made human ships invisible to Council sensors. Entire worlds had been settled and fortified without the Council's knowledge, while their attention focused on obvious targets. The war was not about defending human space, but about revealing how much space humans already controlled. Captain Roy Fisher broadcast from the edge of the galaxy, where human ships were preparing to launch the first intergalactic exploration mission. His message reached every Council world simultaneously, and carried implications that shook their understanding of the conflict. Humans were not trying to defeat the Council, but to outgrow the need for their permission entirely. War Commodore Zethran studied reports of human capabilities that seemed to grow more impossible with each engagement. Their weapons violated known physics, their ships appeared and disappeared at will, their defensive systems could redirect planet killer beams back at their sources. Most disturbing of all, their expansion showed no signs of slowing despite everything the Council had done to stop them. The Council's emergency session lasted 3 days, as member species argued about whether to continue the war or seek immediate peace. The Alterian Empire demanded total victory, while the Crystalline Dominion warned that continued fighting might result in total defeat. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy that could not be contained by CONVN. ONAL means General Williams received intelligence reports from across the galaxy as human spy networks revealed the true scope of Council civilization. Their empire was vast but brittle, held together by fear and tradition rather than genuine strength. Most member species had joined the Council for protection rather than conquest, and many were having second thoughts about the cost of maintaining their authority. Dr. Clarke's final project activation sent shockwaves through Council space as hidden human installations throughout the galaxy came online simultaneously. The Dead Man's Switch was not a weapon, but a revelation. If humanity fell, their technology would be released to every species capable of understanding it, ensuring that the Council's monopoly on advanced weapons would end forever. The war had escalated beyond anything the Council had imagined when they issued their original ultimatum. They had expected to crush primitive rebels in a brief police action. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every defeat and more dangerous with every victory. Ambassador Victor prepared his final report to the Council, knowing that it would determine the fate of galactic civilization. Humans had answered every escalation with greater defiance and demonstrated capabilities that made continued conflict increasingly dangerous. The choice was simple: find a way to coexist with humanity or face the possibility that their 3-century reign might end in defeat. The revelation that humans had been preparing for intergalactic exploration while fighting a war for survival in their home galaxy demonstrated a level of confidence and capability that the Council could no longer ignore. They were not dealing with another rebellious species, but with a civilization that saw the entire universe as their natural domain. The final confrontation came not in the depths of space but in the Council chambers on Centauri Prime, where 12 species had once ruled the galaxy with absolute authority. Now only 8 remained after 4 member worlds had withdrawn from the war that was supposed to have been a simple police action. The crystal spires that had witnessed 3 centuries of Unchallenged dominance now hosted negotiations that would determine the future of galactic civilization. President Helen Davis arrived not as a supplicant begging for mercy, but as an equal. Flanked by Admiral Jake Martinez and General Pete Williams, her simple business suit contrasted sharply with the elaborate, ceremonial armor worn by council representatives, but her presence filled the chamber with quiet confidence. The humans had not come to surrender, but to discuss terms from a position of strength. Ambassador Victor coiled around the speaking platform one final time as he delivered what the council believed would be their generous final offer. Humanity could retain independence within the Sol system and keep their existing colonies, but they must agree never to expand beyond their current borders. The ultimatum that had started the war was replaced by what seemed like reasonable compromise. The council members waited for grateful acceptance or desperate counterproposals, but instead they got something none of them had expected. President Davis stood silently for a long moment, studying the faces of beings who had believed themselves the masters of creation. Then she asked the question that would become legend throughout human space and give the conflict its final name. That's all. She said. The simple words carried more impact than any battle cry or diplomatic protest. They dismissed the council's offer as insufficient and revealed the fundamental gap between human ambitions and alien understanding. The council had been negotiating to contain a problem, while humans had been fighting for the right to grow without limits. Davis explained that the council had misunderstood both the nature of humanity and the reality of their situation. The war had never been about human expansion or aggression, but about freedom. Humans would never accept limitations imposed by others, no matter how technologically advanced those others might be. The very concept was incompatible with human nature. Captain Lisa Brown's voice crackled over the communication system as her ship decloaked above Centauri Prime. The New Horizon was not alone, but accompanied by a human fleet that should not have existed. While the Council had been fighting a defensive war trying to contain human expansion, humans had been playing a completely different game. The revelation that stunned the assembled aliens was that human exploration had never stopped despite the war. While Council fleets battled known human forces throughout the galaxy, other human ships had been spreading into regions that alien maps marked as empty or unexplored. The ghost colonies were just the beginning of human expansion that had already grown beyond the Council's ability to track or control. Admiral Martinez displayed star charts that showed the true scope of human civilization. Hidden bases and settlements dotted the galaxy in places the Council had never thought to look. Entire sectors had been quietly claimed and developed, while alien attention focused on obvious targets. The war had been a distraction while the real expansion continued unseen. Captain Roy Fisher broadcast from the edge of the galaxy, where human ships prepared for the ultimate journey. The first intergalactic exploration mission was ready to launch, carrying human civilization beyond the borders of the known universe. The Council's attempt at containment had failed before it began because humans had already outgrown the need for their permission. General Williams revealed the intelligence networks that had penetrated every aspect of Council civilization. Human spies had worked as translators and clerks and maintenance workers for decades, gathering information and waiting for the day when it would be needed. The Council's military capabilities and political weaknesses were as well known to humanity as their own. Dr. Susan Clark appeared on the main display from her laboratory beneath Titan, where the weapons that had won the war continued their development. Her research had not stopped during the conflict, but accelerated as human scientists found new ways to combine their technology with captured alien systems. The next generation of human weapons would make current capabilities seem primitive. The Council's final desperate offer was to share their advanced technology in exchange for human agreement to respect established borders. They would teach humans the secrets of faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation if humanity would agree to limit their expansion to predetermined zones. The proposal showed how completely they had misunderstood their opponents. President Davis declined the offer with the same polite firmness she had shown throughout the negotiations. Humans did not want to trade with the Council or join their established order. They wanted to leave the Council behind and explore the greater universe that lay beyond the boundaries of known space. The galaxy was just the beginning of human ambitions, not their final destination. The real shock came when Davis delivered humanity's counter-proposal. The Council could join human exploration efforts and help map the greater universe beyond their current borders, or they could stay behind and maintain their rigid order in an increasingly empty galaxy. The choice, she pointed out with a slight smile, was entirely up to them. Ambassador Victor realized that the Council's greatest fear had been realized. They had not just failed to contain humanity, but had created something far more dangerous than an aggressive species. They had forged a people who saw the entire universe as their rightful home and considered any attempt to limit their growth not as a challenge to be met but as an obstacle to be bypassed entirely. The human fleet prepared to depart Centauri Prime, carrying with them the promise of adventures that would dwarf anything the galaxy had seen before. Some Council species would choose to join the great exploration, while others would remain behind, clinging to the safety of known space. Humanity would continue to grow and spread and seek new horizons because that was what humans did. Admiral Martinez spoke to his crew as they prepared for humanity's next great adventure beyond the rim of the galaxy. The universe is bigger than they ever imagined, he said. Time to show them just how big. The words carried the promise of stories yet to be told and worlds yet to be discovered as humanity took its next step into the infinite dark.